Good morning. Welcome to Council this morning on Tuesday, November the 26th, and I'll call the meeting to order as chair. We acknowledge that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the traditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We come with respect for this land that we are on today and for the people who reside here. The peace and friendship treaties that were signed starting in 1725 between the Mi'kmaq and the British Crown were intended to ensure the Mi'kmaq's inherent rights to the lands, territories, and natural resources is respected and protected forever. Are there any acknowledgements, announcements, or recognitions anyone wishes to bring to Council this morning? Councillor Bell.
Good morning. As many people who live on the South Shore know, today's referred to as dumping day, and for many people that in Councillor Reinhardt's district and Councillor Bell's district, there are a lot of fishers that go out today. It's important for the economic business for Nova Scotia. We happen to live in one of the largest districts, or the largest district in Canada, for fishery for lobster. I'm hoping that all those families have a safe and prosperous season. Thank you.
Councillor Reno.
Councillor Bell spoke to the same thing I was going to bring. The waters off of Blue Rocks was shining this morning as everybody was happy to go out and set their traps. May we wish them a safe and prosperous season.
And Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Over the weekend, I attended the last in a series of 4 book launches by the group, the Little Books Collective. This group of 12 local writers worked together over the past year to edit their poetry and prose, design chapbooks, bind them, and launch them in the community. The South Shore Public Library has been crucial to this group. They first came together in a writing workshop series hosted by the Lunenburg branch, and they've been supported along the way by other community organizations such as the Awesome Foundation, the Writers' Federation of Nova Scotia, and the League of Canadian Poets. They're publishing their own works, but it's not exactly self-publishing. It's called collaborative publishing. And it's an example of how writers can support each other to find their voices, develop new skills, and find the confidence to share their expression with the community. I want to congratulate the group on their successful 2024 launch and acknowledge their unique contribution to the arts and culture on the South Shore.
Thank you to everyone for those recognitions and accomplishments. Casey, or Councillor DeLong.
Thank you very much. I don't have anything prepared, so mine's not going to be as eloquent. I'm sorry. But I do want to acknowledge a resident in District 8 for their recent book launch, Wanda Baxter, and illustrator Leah Boudreau, who recently launched She is Hope for Wildlife, which is the life story of Hope Swinimer of Hope for Wildlife.
Thank you. This morning is a very special morning, as often we recognize fire service in our community, but today we have 3 who have served for 50 years. So it truly is quite an accomplishment and a day of great recognition. And our first recipient today of the 50 years of recognition is Aubrey McCarthy from the Hebbs Cross Fire Department. And the notes that I was given were given by some of the other firemen from that fire department. Aubrey, for his 53 years of service, began with at a time when there were 2 trucks and a one-room schoolhouse serving as the building for the fire department. When Aubrey joined the fire service in 1971, he got a chance to learn about firefighting from the men who helped establish the fire department in that community, Reggie and Alan Bolivar, Huey and Boyd Zwicker, and Ivan Stewart, and so many other men from that community. In those days, men would rush into the hall and pull on the long thigh-high boots, throw over the long black coats and the heavy helmets. It was a time when there was one set of gear for 3 members. Aubrey was always the guy who said that he knew a guy who could help with the repairs and the donations of labor that were given to keep the trucks going. It's how fire departments in many of our communities were built. Aubrey was the truck captain and moved to the head of the truck committee, where he knew just what to do. I think I got to know Aubrey when he took on working at the Hebbs Cross firefighters' breakfast, and he would drive around with Margaret, putting up posters, and I met him at the market because that was one of the stops he made, to put up the poster advertising the breakfast. He had a team of volunteers he would call on, some of whom who didn't even live in the community. They didn't want to let Aubrey down. No one did. A great description of him is captured in these words that were given to me. Aubrey always had a smile and something good to say. He was dedicated and loved the fire service immensely. He was an all-round great guy. We know he couldn't have done it without the love and support of Margaret and his whole family, who are sitting with us today. She's as deserving of a medal as he is. A volunteer career of 53 years is an amazing accomplishment. The members are proud to follow in your footsteps and will carry on the work you've been a huge part of. They've said they will try and do it with a smile and a positive attitude and something good to say, as long as they don't have to cheer for the Montreal Canadiens. Congratulations, Aubrey and Margaret, and thank you for your service. We're going to just stand in front of those flags. Come right in with us. You're right in with us. Sure, yeah, okay. If one wasn't enough, we have more. Walter Jodry from Upper Northfield, from the Northfield District Fire Department. Walter joined the department in the winter of 1974 with friends looking for a new adventure and an opportunity to help out his community. When he joined the department, there were 2 bay garages and 2 1962 Ford trucks. Walter worked at Michelin for 40 of those years. He served as secretary for several years and also served as lieutenant for several years. The notes I was given repeated the use of the word fun associated with so many of the things that Walter did. He was either looking for fun or adding to the fun, and I think we can all appreciate how this would have helped to make him such a valuable part of the fire service. Walter had a great relationship with officers and firefighters, whether during a fire, an emergency, or in all the fun experiences in the department. He jumped into the work without hesitation, serving as a firefighter, as a volunteer with garden parties and bingo to fundraise for the department. The true mark of a great fire service volunteer is a willingness to help new recruits feel welcome. Walter does this and continues to pass on his experience and encourage new firefighters in every way possible. It is a great honor to celebrate his 50 years of firefighting service. Walter Jodrey, congratulations. And again, if two wasn't enough, we still have a third, and there's more. This year we will present, I think 5 is the number that we have. The final one this morning is David Vino, who joined the Mahone Bay and District Fire Department in January of 1974. And I should say Mahone Bay serves Maiders Cove, Oakland, and Clearland. So we sometimes, that had to be explained to me because I didn't realize how the service was provided in those communities. He's been an active firefighter and is currently on the investigation team and is also involved in visiting sick in the community. So congratulations for 50 years of service, and we're happy to honor you today in the same way we've honored Walter and Aubrey. So thank you to the families and friends who have come this morning to be part of that celebration of the 50 years of service to our fire departments in our community. Thank you very much, and again, my congratulations to the 3 recipients this morning. It really was a pleasure for me to be able to recognize you on behalf of council. Yeah. I missed this, but we'll do this.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Okay, we'll resume with our agenda for this morning, and there is a proclamation for Municipal Awareness Week. Whereas municipal government is responsible for the provision of services that enhance the quality of life of its citizens, and whereas dedicated mayors, wardens, councillors, and staff are essential for the effective governance of their municipalities, and whereas citizen involvement is essential for an active community, and whereas it is fitting and proper to recognize and encourage the contribution of all who work diligently for the improvement of municipalities. Therefore, be it proclaimed that the week of November 25th to December 1st be known as Municipal Awareness Week in the municipality of the District of Lunenburg, in recognition of the vital role of municipal government and in recognition of all whose efforts support it. And I so proclaim. Municipal Council allows an opportunity for public input, and we have made a few modifications to the approach we're going to take in this sitting of council on public input. So I'm going to just read through the plan for this and hope that we will continue to have involvement from the public in presenting to council. Public input is one of several opportunities for the public to engage with council. Residents are welcome to use the public input portion of the meeting to share their thoughts with the council on municipal topics that are important to them. We ask that all statements be respectful of other members of the public, staff, and council. The chair will respond to questions that can easily be answered, and I'll consult with our CAO if it's appropriate that we answer directly. It is at my discretion as chair to make that determination. Your questions and concerns will be handled in 2 ways if it cannot be answered at the time of the presentation. We will email you with answers to your questions and comment on your concerns to provide background clarification or further information on the process council will follow. We ask that at the end of the presentation you record your name, your email and phone number as contact information for following up from the presentation or from today's meeting if there's anyone to provide public input. We will provide a summary of answers at the next council meeting under business arising from the minutes, which will provide information to everyone through the video and audio recordings. Statements, questions related to personnel can be emailed to the Chief Administrative Officer, Tom McEwen. There are 15 minutes allocated for public input today, which are shared between the speakers. So is there anyone here for public input? Seeing none today, we look forward to the days ahead when I do expect there will be those who will want to be engaged with us. And I'd like to remind everyone that our public engagement website, engagemodl.ca, has information on any upcoming open houses, workshops, or other events where the public can share their concerns and have questions answered on various topics. The public are free to contact their district councilor directly with any concerns, and their contact information is available on the MODL website. Please make sure that you check that out, and we welcome an opportunity to see you attending council meetings in the future. The chair would ask if we could have a motion to approve the agenda. Moved by Councillor Hubley, seconded by Councillor Vino. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by raising their hand. Contrary-minded, unanimously approved. We have minutes from previous meetings, and we will deal with these separately. The first meeting was October 8th, 2024, which was a public hearing. Could we have a motion to approve? Moved by Councillor Moore, seconded by Councillor Oikel. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll approve the minutes as circulated. The second meeting is from October 8th, the 2024 council meeting. Do we have a mover for the adoption of the minutes? Moved by Councillor DeLong, seconded by Councillor Hubley. Is there any discussion? All in favor signify by raising their hand. Contrary? Unanimously approved. And finally, the minutes from the November 12th meeting of council, a special council meeting. Do we have a mover for that? Councillor Vino, seconder. Councillor Burns. Is there any discussion? All in favor signify by raising their hand. Motion is carried unanimously. We'll move to the awarding of tenders, and that would be RFP 2024-05403, Conqueror Bank's wastewater collection system inflow. And it will be Larry, Mr. Feener, and Mr. Richardson. Thank you, Tom.
All right. Good morning, Council. As was mentioned, I'm Tyler Richardson, Municipal Engineer here at the municipality, and with me is Larry Feener, Senior Municipal Engineer here at the municipality. And we're going to be discussing the award of RFP 2024-05403, Conqueror Bank Wastewater Collection System Inflow and Infiltration Repair. So the Conqueror Bank plant is one of 3 plants. That's a plant and collection system. A study was undertaken by CBCL Limited in March of 2024 to investigate the extent of inflow and infiltration, commonly known as I&I, in the collection system. The study identified evidence of I&I issues in the collection system along the service section on Shore Drive, so right along the river. The portion of the collection system on Shore Drive serves 11 residents in total and is in need of repair at 8 of these properties. So 8 of the properties along that Shore Drive collection system have shown evidence of inflow and infiltration. Request for proposals 2024-05403 Conqueror Bank Wastewater Collection System Inflow and Infiltration Repair was issued on October 30th, 2024. It closed on November 13th, 2024. No proposals were received by the deadline from any proponents. Due to the lack of proponent interest, alternative procurement through a selected contractor is the most advantageous method to remain on schedule for completion in this fiscal year and proceed with the necessary restoration work for the wastewater collection system. Similar work has been undertaken in New Germany last fiscal year, as well as previously on the Cookville collection system, to address I&O issues on other collection systems owned and operated by the municipality. The work is completed through a subcontract arrangement with Eastern Trenches Limited and addressed a variety of damage to the collection system. Similar repairs are to be completed in the Conqueror Bank collection system as identified by the study and done on previous collection systems. So the included capital budget figure for 2024-2025 was placed at $50,000, which is lower than the received quote of $52,000 that we have received from Eastern Trenches Technology. So leading to a recommendation. Council authorize staff to close RFP 2024-05403, Conqueror Bank Wastewater Collection System, Inflow and Infiltration Repair, due to no submitted proposals. Council also authorized staff to approve the use of alternative procurement practices as outlined in MDL 33, Purchasing and Tendering, Section 19, to engage Eastern Trenchless Limited to complete the work outlined in the posted request for proposals at an amount of $52,000 plus net HST.
Thank you. Is there, or are there questions? Councillor Oikel.
I'm just wondering where the other $2,000 is coming from.
Larry can probably speak better to this, but I believe a wastewater reserve.
Thank you.
Other questions? Councillor Brooks.
I guess just so I'm learning the process, do you have any idea why you didn't receive any bids at all on this project?
We were a little surprised not to receive any. Eastern Trenchless, as we were talking about there, have done some previous work for us, so they know that, you know, we have collection systems and we do that kind of work, so we were a little surprised to not see any kind of bids. And there was plenty of time, and we had created, the RFP process can be kind of in-depth to receive contractors, so we had kind of modified it in some ways to make it more simple, I guess, for contractors to submit a price. So we were a little surprised not to see anybody submit a proposal.
Did you hear any feedback from any of those contractors on that process, that they were unclear with anything? No feedback at all?
We had no feedback from anybody, no.
Other questions? Seeing none, we have two motions that we need to deal with on this matter, so I would entertain someone to put these on the floor individually. If we could have a mover and seconder, please.
I can move the first one. To Her Worship Mayor McLean-Weil and members of council, I move that Municipal Council authorize staff to close RFP 2024-05-403, Conqueror Bank Wastewater Collection System, Inflow and Infiltration Repair, due to receiving no proposals. I so move.
Do we have a seconder for the motion? Seconded by Councillor Burns. Is there discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by raising their hand. Motion is passed unanimously. The second part of this consideration this morning, could someone make a motion? Councillor Bell?
Thank you. To Her Honor, Mayor McLean-Weil and members of council, I move that Municipal Council approve the use of alternative procurement practices as outlined in Policy 33, Purchasing and Tendering, Section 19(1)(4), to engage Eastern Trenchless Limited to complete the work outlined in RFP 2024-05-403, Conqueror Bank Wastewater Collection System Inflow and Infiltration Repair in the amount of $52,000 plus net HST. I so move.
Been moved by Councillor Bell. Do we have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Reinhardt. Is there discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by raising their hand. Contrary-minded? The motion is unanimously passed. Our presenters for the presentation this morning, those folks haven't arrived yet, so we'll move down to the recommendations from Policy and Strategy meeting. And just for the record, I think it's important for those that may be watching today or listening to the recordings, that if you need more information on the discussion that'll be the motions that are presented today and the discussion that you may find short, if you go back to the meeting on November 19th to listen to the recording or view the video, you'll be able to hear the full discussion at council. So today it may appear to be short, because we've already had a good discussion on it, and there may be other questions that arise, but the details can be found on those recordings from November 19th. So we'll begin with agenda number 10.1.1, which is the repeal and replace a policy MDL 037, respecting a code of conduct. And I'll ask our Deputy CAO to lead us with this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as mentioned, there was a robust discussion and presentation on this last week at our Policy and Strategy Committee meeting. Just by way of quick summary, the province is requiring through regulation that every council in Nova Scotia adopt a model code of conduct, which includes behavioral requirements. It also includes an investigative process and a set of sanctions that can be applied by council if found that a council member has breached the code of conduct. So we have the model code of conduct here ready for adoption by council. There's also a motion clarifying that because the provincial training is not available, notwithstanding the language in the policy, council will complete the training within 30 days of it becoming available from the province and the NSFM. And finally, there's a motion to amend policy MDL 04, which will take the code of conduct and apply it to committee members who are not council members but get appointed to council committees. And this is because your previous code of conduct did apply to committee members, and the model code of conduct does not apply. It only applies to council members. So by amending your committee's policy, you can make the behavioral elements apply to appointed committee members.
Thank you. We'll deal with the motions as they're listed to deal with these three particular items, which deal with code of conduct, the code of conduct for elected officials, and for the non-council appointments to council. So, Councillor Hubley.
Thank you. To Her Honor Mayor McLean-Weil and members of council, I move that Municipal Council accept the recommendation of the Policy and Strategy Committee and repeal Policy 037, respecting code of conduct, and replace it with new policy 037, code of conduct for elected officials as presented. And I so move.
We have a seconder for the motion, seconded by Councillor Oikel. Is there discussion, questions on this? Councillor Brooks.
Can you remind us, Alex, when we're going to see the staff code of conduct?
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Through the chair, the staff code of conduct takes the same behavioral elements. Sorry, let me back up. The original code of conduct, MDL 37, applied to both council members, committee members, and staff. The revised model code only applies to council members. The benefit of the new code is that it has independent investigative process and then clear sanctions, which are improvements over the previous model. At the staff level, the code of conduct simply referred if there was any violations to the personnel policy and the performance management system that exists in there. So the approach that we will be taking is taking the behavioral elements of the code and adopting them in a procedure, which can be approved by the CAO. So we have a draft of that, which is working through our procedural approval process at the staff level. So the same behavioral requirements will be applied to staff, and then the investigative and the disciplinary process already exists for staff in the personnel policy.
And when do we expect to see that?
There is no council approval for a procedural item. So it doesn't need to come to council for approval, but it contains identical provisions for the behavioral requirements.
Other questions? All those in favor of, we're dealing with the motion 10.1.1. It's been moved and seconded. Is all those in favor signify by raising their hand? Contrary minded? Motion is passed unanimously.
No.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Okay. One opposed, Councillor Brooks. We'll move on then to the second motion that's related to these issues, and that's 10.1.2, which is a mandatory code of conduct training for elected officials. Do we have a mover for this motion? Councillor Oikle.
To Her Honor, Mayor McLean-Weil and members of council, I move that Municipal Council accept the recommendations of the Policy and Strategy Committee for councilors to complete mandatory training on the Code of Conduct within 30 days of the province providing the training, notwithstanding Section 21.1 of the Policy 037 Code of Conduct for elected officials, and I so move.
Do we have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Burns. Is there discussion on this motion? Councillor Oikle.
Oops, I just have one question, or a comment, actually. When, I know that it will probably come down through the province, will probably let us know, as well as the NSFM. But is it possible for members of the administration to also remind us and let us know, because we do only have 30 days and we may not, with all the emails that we get, we may miss it or get sidetracked. So I was just wondering if that could happen.
Yes, absolutely. That's our intention, is that once it is available, we'll make sure that council members know and are provided an opportunity to complete it.
Other questions or discussion on the motion? All those in favor of motion as it's recorded in 10.1.2, raise their hand, please. In favor? Those that are opposed? Councillor Brooks. Motion is passed. The final motion on these matters is 10.1.3, which is amendments to Policy 004, non-council appointments and honorariums. If we could have someone move this. Councillor Moore? And a seconder, please.
To Her Honor, Mayor McLean-Weil and members of council, I move that Municipal Council accept the recommendation of the Policy and Strategy Committee and approve the amendments to Policy 004, non-council appointments and honorariums as presented, to include that committee members are subject to the same code of conduct as council members.
I'll second that.
And it's been seconded by Councillor Hubley. Questions or discussions on this? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by raising their hand. And those who are opposed? It's passed with one in opposition, Councillor Brooks. Our presenters are not here, so we'll move on with the approval to the agenda item 10.1.4, which is approval of tax relief for damaged properties. And our Director of Financial Services, Ms. Wenzel, will take us through the next few points on our agenda.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. As we indicated last week at the Policy and Strategy Committee, there is 2 properties here that were damaged by fire that apply for tax relief under the council policy. And because those the amounts were over $500, I did have to bring it to council for your approval, which I am doing now. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to entertain those. Thank you.
Okay, so we have several motions related to this. So we'll start with 10.1.4, which is the approval of tax relief for damaged property, AAN 04635191. Could we have a motion to put this on the floor, please? It's moved by Councillor Oikle, seconded by Councillor Brooks. Or, sorry.
Is it okay?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Councillor Oikle, could you read it, please, first, and then we'll have Councillor Brooks.
All right.
Second it.
To Her Honor, Mayor McLean-Weil and members of council, I move that Municipal Council accept the recommendation of the Policy and Strategy Committee and approve tax relief in the amount of $734.21 for the property located at 88 Lakeview Haven Drive, Hebville, AAN 04635191, as per Policy 12, Tax Exemption Reduction Policy, and I so move.
We do have a seconder, Councillor Brooks. Thank you. Is there a discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion, please raise their hand. And those who are opposed, motion is carried unanimously. Could we move on then to 10.1.5, the approval of tax relief for damaged property AAN 03339793? Would someone move that, make that motion? Councillor Moore.
To Her Honor Mayor McLean Wall and members of council, I move that municipal council accept the recommendation of the Policy Strategy Committee and approve tax relief in the amount of $786.11 for the property located at 25 Bars Corner Road, New Germany, AAN 03339793, as per policy 012 tax exemption reduction policy, and I so move.
Do we have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Smith. Is there discussion or questions on the motion? All those in favor signify by raising their hand. Those opposed, motion is carried unanimously. And could we move then to motion 10.1.6 on property tax sales? Maybe we should, would you like to speak to that first? Yes.
Certainly, Your Worship, I can just do a quick overview of the of this recommendation. So staff, we are holding our annual tax sale on March the 3rd, 2025. We had a discussion at the Policy and Strategy Committee about the alternatives to what kinds of options there were for the council, whether we hold it by public auction, whether we hold it by tender, whether we defer it entirely. So staff, we're looking for a recommendation to have it by tender call, as we've done that in the past and have been very successful. Thank you.
We do have a motion regarding this, 10.1.6 on property tax sales. Would someone like to make that motion? Councillor Brooks has moved. Do we have a seconder?
He has to read it.
Oh, yes, he does have to read it. Thank you.
To Her Honor Mayor McLean Weil and councils, I move that my 10.1.6, pardon me, that municipal council accept the recommendation of the Policy and Strategy Committee to authorize the treasurer to proceed with the tender call for the March 3rd, 2025 tax sale, and further that all future tax sales be conducted using a tender call process. I so declare.
We have a mover. Do we have a seconder for the motion? Seconded by Councillor Hubley. Is there discussion? Questions? Councillor Oikel.
Yes, so with the added line, further that all future tax sales be conducted using a tender call process, then you will not be coming back each year to ask us about this. Is that what that is saying?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, great. That's good. Thank you.
Councillor DeLong.
Thank you. I didn't get my hand up before the motion got put on the floor. Can I still ask a question just about tax sales in general? Okay. So I know that we discussed this in the previous council, that staff do look at properties for conservation value prior to them going to tax sale. But could you speak to that history just a little bit for new council members?
Certainly. So if there is a property on the tax sale list that could be used for conservation, we do look at it. The municipality can bid on the property if council wants to bid on it. So you would have to, if it was a tender process, in an auction, you would authorize your municipal solicitor to bid against the others. If it was a tender call, you would have to just put in a sealed bid for it. The solicitor would put in a sealed bid per council's authorization. However, if it's been in 3 tax sales and it doesn't sell, because a lot of the conservation properties would probably be on a floodplain or maybe a little swampy or those kinds of things, in usual, I know we've had in the past where we've had one sell that was infilled, but that was I think certainly a separate matter. However, and staff didn't identify that as a conservation area at the time. So the only remedy in the Act is to let it go through the 3 tax sales. Once it goes through 3 tax sales, if no one's bid on it, then the municipality can essentially take it themselves because you don't have to go through the process anymore. Like once you've put it in 3 tax sales publicly, then you have an option for the municipality to kind of buy it themselves.
Do you have a further question, Councillor DeLong?
Yeah, thank you. So this is not a policy that we have, this is just something internally that staff does. They'll check things, check tax sale properties to see if they have conservation value. Do those then go through to council to ask if we want to bid on it?
Yes, of course. We have done that in the past. The tax sale list, as soon as it's done, and it is in the Act that the municipality can bid on properties if it has municipal interest. So we do follow the Act for that. And as soon as we do the tax sale list, it gets sent to other departments like recreation and planning so that they can look at it in case there is interest in that property and their recommendation that perhaps it could be used for conservation or for recreation purposes as well.
Thank you very much.
Just as additional information, particularly for new council members, the previous council passed a motion for staff to prepare a draft land conservation policy, which does formalize the tax sale review process and also identifies criteria and processes. So that is working its way back up to a future policy and strategy committee meeting.
Thank you for that. I think there were a couple of other councillors that wanted to speak. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. I just wanted to review before I vote, I'd like to review the privacy implications of moving to this system. I think they were raised at the policy and strategy meeting. But is it possible that names can be removed when the tax sale is posted online? Or how is privacy affected by moving from the system that we used in the past to the system that we're going forward with?
Certainly, I think I can answer that through to Councillor Smith. When your property's in a tax sale and you haven't paid it, it's public. So whoever owns the property, where those ads are going to go on the, advertised in the paper and posted on our website. So it is public information at that time. As far as the people who bid in a public auction, the public is there when people bid. So in the tender process, the bids are public as well. So there would be no removing of names in the whole process because it is a public process.
Do you have a further question, Councillor Smith?
Yeah, I guess from the conversation that we had at Policy and Strategy, I was led to believe that there's like a further publication of names with the tender system, but is that not the case? The privacy implications aren't really changed?
I don't believe so, because we always posted the properties publicly, so on our website and in the paper, and we keep those records on our website. So I don't think there's really any privacy implications about that. Like, we just publish names, we don't publish other data, like addresses or anything like that that could further identify people that I think, but certainly if the taxes aren't paid, it is public knowledge.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions? Councillor Reinhardt.
Yeah, just getting back to the purchasing lands for conservation purposes. Once the list is there, can council members bring forward, if we see a property that we think has value, like what would be the process to have that examined?
Sure, certainly, Councillor Reinhardt. So when we issue the tax sale list, we also give it to all of the councillors and we mark which districts all the properties are on. So if you see a property in your district that you think might be of interest, then you would contact our planning and recreation departments, and they could certainly, through the CAO, take a look at those properties as well if you think it's of a municipal interest.
Councillor Oikel.
Yeah, I've been through this process quite a number of times now, but something that you said, I'm confused. So how is somebody supposed to know what the property is if you don't publish the address? Because you just said you don't put the address.
No, I don't put the personal address of the person, but the civic address of the property is
Okay.
posted. But certainly like a mailing address or something like that, that might be
Okay.
attached to a person, would not be posted.
And would their name also go on, like, so it would say Wendy and Michael Oikel's property, it would have to say our name, has to say our
Yes, it
name.
does, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Counselor Vino, you've been waiting patiently.
Thank you so much. Just looking for some clarification. When this came up at the previous council, I voted against it as I was hearing from residents that they preferred the traditional style. I haven't heard that this time around, so I will be supporting the motion. But if any point in time this council or a future council wishes to go back, is that a possibility? I'm just worried where it applies to all future tax sales that were carved in stone. If you could clarify that for me, that would be great.
Certainly, Councillor Vino. At any motion of council, it's my understanding that you could rescind that motion within, after 6 months, I think is the time period. So if in a future council they thought that a public auction would be better served, then you would ask staff to proceed that way. It wouldn't be cut in stone forever, but it would just alleviate us coming to you every year and asking.
And Counselor Burns, I think you had your hand up.
Oh, I just wanted to mention to folks, it's more of a comment. The municipality doesn't do it, but if you look up the tax assessment number, that will bring you to the land registry. All the information that we're talking about, like mailing addresses and names, is a matter of public record at the provincial level. So what we're doing here really won't affect the public's access to any of those registries. We post the name and the assessment number, but anyone who is going and investigating the property prior to tax sale, which I would beg people to do, is all the information that we're sort of talking about is there. So it really isn't the municipality that's throwing that out there. It has to be just by a function of our land registry system that the names and associated addresses would be available. We're not throwing anyone under the bus that way particularly.
Okay. The further questions or discussion? There's good information provided there. Do we have someone who would, we had a mover and a seconder. It's been moved by Councillor Brooks and seconded by Councillor Hubley. All those in favor of accepting the motion, raise their hand, please. And those who are opposed, Councillor Burns is in opposition. Motion is carried. We will move on to housing market data study, and it will be Mr. Shepherd, our Deputy Director of Planning and Development Services. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. I'll just do a brief refresher of what this motion contains. It's basically step one of a process to obtain additional housing market information. So what this would do would be to instruct staff to prepare a request for proposals. Then we would come back to council, hopefully with receiving some proposals for council to make a final decision on awarding that. So this is just to prepare that. But what the information that we're looking for here is additional market information such as rental rates and vacancy rates from our area. We're aware that there's a real lack of that data, and we're also aware that that is proving to be an issue for both our nonprofit and private sector developers who are finding trouble with financing from CMHC and other funders when they go to apply for funding. So we're seeing that there is likely a real serious implication in terms of providing affordable housing in our area due to this lack of information. So this is attempting to help address that issue and try to obtain some more of that housing market information.
Thank you for that overview. I think we recognize this is really critical information. Could we have the motion put on the floor, and then we'll have discussion about any questions or comments people want to make? Councillor Vino.
I can put that on the floor. To Her Honor, Mayor McLean-Weil and members of council, I move that Municipal Council accept the recommendation of the Policy and Strategy Committee and direct staff to prepare a request for proposal for a study to provide updated housing market information and address known data gaps that will support affordable housing initiatives within the region. And further, the council send a formal request to neighboring municipalities within Lunenburg County to participate in the study, and I so move.
Been moved. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Moore has seconded. Now, questions and discussion. Councillor Bell, you can start us off.
Thank you. While I will be supporting the motion, I realize this information is important to apply for provincial grants or programs that may be available. However, I do think it is a sly way for the provincial government to download their responsibility on us to get a report done to provide them this data paid for by municipal monies instead of provincial monies, because through service exchange, it is their responsibility for housing. I just wanted to make that point known.
Councillor Oikel, you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you. Through you, I'm just wondering if this is going to also cover holiday and temporary rentals.
It's not going to specifically address that. This is going to look at primarily rental, like full-time rental vacancies or rental market. Now, if some of those happen to be, short-term rentals as well, then that data may come up, but it's not targeting short-term rentals.
Yeah, no, I know it wasn't targeting. I was just wondering if it would be including it or not.
We only want to include it if it has an impact on the long-term rental market. So if, for example, if there's units out there that are rented just for a very short period of time of the year, but their primary use may be part of the long-term rental market, we would want to obtain that. We don't have a way of knowing necessarily until we ask where that might fall, but we'll certainly try to obtain as much as we can.
Other questions? Councillor Brooks.
I think I asked you just briefly the other day when we were talking about this, but please refresh my memory. What is the data gathering process, and are you looking to other communities who've had success with best practices because we want to get this right?
The primary way of obtaining this is through a survey, so that may take different forms. It may be partially electronic, but I think likely the most successful route is actually reaching out individually to known landlords. So what we'll be doing is looking for the best contact information for them, and the consultant who would be hired would be calling those directly to try to obtain that information. As part of what we're doing, we'll be looking to our consultant as well for best practices on who is doing this. I've personally consulted with a lot of colleagues across Atlantic Canada on this issue. There has been some success in doing this, but it literally is just sometimes a matter of really kind of knocking on doors because the hardest piece of this is really obtaining the data. So as I mentioned, I guess last week at Policy and Strategy, one of the sources of information we'll look to use is our fire inspection information. So you may be aware that there are certain size of rental units that are required for fire inspections, and so there is some information that we can that we have internally already. That we have known information where there's a landlord who has a certain building of a certain size, and so that's a really good starting place to be able to start to reach out. But we will look beyond that as well, of course.
Are property tax records an avenue where you can identify rental properties?
I don't know the answer to that question specifically, but we'll look to our consultant because, of course, the consultants that we'll be looking at do this stuff on a day-to-day basis. So they're very familiar with the resources, the tax information or the municipal information that we could access.
Councillor Smith.
I am wondering if, as part of this study, if there will be any kind of process set up in order to refresh this information as needed, because I assume it's just going to be a snapshot in time and we'll be back at the same problem again.
That is a question I think that we want to be able to address. I don't think we know yet, you know, what the information looks like, how different it might be from what we have now, and what makes sense in terms of how often does this change. I think that is a concern that we have, given the information we have right now, is that what we know in terms of the previous housing needs studies that were done. So we had one done here in 2016. We had another one done by the province in 2022. But we know already that 2022 study is quite stale, and there were gaps at that time as well. So I think that is a conversation that does need to be had. From our view, it is a concern about ongoing, but we're not, I guess, we don't have enough information yet to say how that should be done or how often.
Councillor DeLong.
The gaps that you referenced, is there going to be any kind of guidance given to the consultant to address those gaps specifically?
Yes, exactly, Councillor. That's very much what we're looking to do. We're looking to target the specific information that's relevant to the funding that these groups are looking for. So in terms of the information, for example, that was gathered in the recent needs assessment in 2022, that covered a whole lot of aspects, including things like the ownership market. So, for example, what dwellings that people may own, and in terms of what that market looks like, that's not as relevant to the project that are looking. So we're looking to target specifically those areas, and as part of that work, we'll be looking to work with, get input from like CMHC and other kind of key people in that sector to help inform the work to make sure that it's targeting the right information.
Any other questions? Councillor Reinhardt.
Yeah, just clarification from the report. You mentioned that you'd like to include the towns, so it won't just be the municipality. So, but you haven't worked that out completely with the towns. So will that be, will the RFP be just for the municipality, or will it include Bridgewater, Mahone Bay, Lunenburg, and Chester?
Yeah, so what our recommendation here is that the study does need to look at all of the areas within the county. Regardless of the participation of the other units, that it would not be sufficient to exclude those geographies. It would skew the results that we see. As you can imagine, the rental market in the town of Bridgewater has a major influence on the projects that occur here in Cookeville, and likewise. So the data does need to be collected in those jurisdictions. We don't have confirmation of full support from all of those units. Primarily, that's because most of them asked for a formal request from this council. So should council agree to support this motion, that would allow us to then send that formal request, and that would go to those subsequent councils. We do have the support from the town of Bridgewater already, and that's because their planning and development department was able to kind of give confirmation of that. It would be within their budget. They didn't need to go to their council for that approval. But the other units, we've spoken with all of them, just simply wanted to confirm with their council through kind of a formal request.
Further questions or discussion? We have a motion on the floor. It's been moved by Councillor Vino and seconded by Councillor Moore that we move ahead with this as it's captured in the motion. All those in favor signify by raising their hand. And those who are opposed, motion is carried unanimously. We're going to do a couple of smaller items, and then we'll break for 10 minutes, and then I think our presenters are here and we'll come back to the presentation on palliative care. But we do have captured in a motion regarding attendance at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Sustainable Communities Conference in February in Fredericton. And as is the policy, that travel outside outside Nova Scotia must be approved by council. And we do have a motion to cover that. So if someone could make that, bring forward that motion. It's been moved by Councillor. Yeah, it's been moved by Councillor Brooks.
Because I'm in it, sorry.
Yeah, it's been moved by, Councillor Brooks. Could you read the motion, please?
To Her Honor Mayor McLean Weil and members of the council, I move that Municipal Council accept the recommendation of the Policy and Strategy Committee and authorize the attendance of Councillors Oikel and DeLong at the FCM Sustainable Communities Conference in Fredericton, New Brunswick on February 10, 13, 2025. I so move.
Do we have a seconder for the motion? Seconded by Councillor Hubley. Any discussion? Councillor Oikel.
Yeah, just for the record, I just wanted to say that the conference's program covers key topics and best practices in sustainability and housing and climate change adaptation. And we're going to be able to develop new knowledge and skills to build sustainable communities, and also on how to plan what we learn to directly affect our communities and bring it back to council.
Councillor Brooks.
I was just wondering if Councillor Oikel, you'd be willing to do a short synopsis when you return, or participants in it, just to give us a little bit of an overview of your perspective of your time there, and take a bit of council's time to relay that information.
If I may answer, yes, Councillor Brooks, normally in council, when we go to conferences, we usually do report, and I do have no problem with doing that. And that is part of my plan, to confer with Councillor DeLong as well as Councillor Bell, who has previously gotten approval, for all of us to kind of put together our own take on it and then to report.
Good. The motion has been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please raise their hand. Those opposed, motion is carried unanimously. And if we could ask the chairman of the nominating committee to report on the appointments to boards and committees, and then we'll take a break. Councillor Oikel, you're chairman of that committee. Could you do that, please?
Yes, I do not have the list before me, but you will all be receiving your appointments. We work together, myself, the mayor, Councillor Smith and Councillor Bell, on your appointments. We hope that you will be happy with them. And if you're not, I don't know what to tell you about that. But some of them are for a year and some of them are for 2 years. And we hope that you'll be able to attend all those meetings. Some of them are that you are able to do by Zoom. You wouldn't have to necessarily go in person, but you would need to contact those committees to find out if that is a way that you can participate.
Can you bring the motion forward, please?
Certainly. To Her Honor Mayor McLean Weil and members of council, I move that Municipal Council accept the recommendation of the nominating committee and approve the appointments to committees and boards for the period of November 2024 to November 2025 as presented.
And we have a seconder, Councillor Moore. Is there discussion on the motion? Councillor Moore.
Thank you. Are we going to get a calendar that shows us what days and times these committees meet? Because some of us have to plan a couple weeks ahead at least. And if there's a library meeting next month, or if there's I know there's no planning and advisory this month, but not until January, but just so that we know, when we're planning our weeks. Thank you. And where the meetings happen. Thank you.
I think that's been noted by staff, so we'll make sure that that gets circulated. Other questions All those in favor of accepting, oh, do we have a seconder? I don't think we had a second. Oh, yes, we do. It's been moved by Councillor Oyko and seconded by Councillor Moore to accept the nominating committee's report as it's outlined in 10.2.1. All those in favor signify by raising their hand. Those opposed, motion is carried unanimously. And we will take a 10-minute break and come back to presentation, please. Could we resume our meeting, please? I would like to resume our meeting and welcome representatives from the South Shore Palliative Care Society, Trudy Johnson, who's the chairperson for the organization, and Marlene Wheatley Down, who's the vice chairman, to make a presentation on behalf of their group. Trudy and Marlene have been very dedicated volunteers in our community, and I think Trudy was one of the founding members of the Palliative Care Society. They've been working diligently for a number of years on a variety of initiatives here, and they're with us this morning, and I'd welcome them to the podium to make a presentation.
For inviting us this morning. And do I have to, here it comes. As Mayor McLean-Weil mentioned, we have been at this for a few years. We started in 2019, and the purpose of founding the South Shore Hospice Palliative Care Society was a realization that we are one of only 2 places in Nova Scotia that do not have dedicated palliative care beds. And so when we created our mission and vision statement, it was around not a reflection on the level of medical care that people are receiving, but a reflection on the fact that if people are at end of life, they really had very few choices on where end of life might be. So if you chose home, supports go into the home, but if you went to a hospital, there was no choice of what your bed space might be. So that was part of our founding principles. So we wanted to spend a few minutes this morning talking to you about hospice palliative care and talking about some of the initiatives we've undertaken and also where we'd like to go in the future. So I'll turn it over to Marlene to get started.
Thank you. So being the person with a healthcare background, I guess I get to talk a little bit to you about palliative care and hospice care. There is some confusion sometimes about the difference between the two. So with palliative care, it's, all right. It's, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I had to change the slides for you. It's a patient-centered coordinated care that aims to relieve the suffering and improve the quality of life for patients who have life-limiting illness. So sometimes when you're referred to palliative care, it doesn't mean you'll be with them forever. Some people who are referred to palliative care actually can recover to a state that they no longer have to be followed by palliative care. But it focuses on a holistic approach to treat the impacts of that type of illness, both on the family and the patients. And it's usually provided in addition to the care that their primary health care team or their clinical team provides. I'm going to skip a couple of slides here. Okay, and just go over, just to let you know that we do have professional palliative care services in our communities. So they do, we focus on Lunenburg and Queens County. We do have a professional palliative care team through Nova Scotia Health. And that team looks after patients and the families who are referred to them. And they're a very dedicated group. They do excellent work. They have a team of nurses, they have an LPN, RNs, social worker, and a number of physicians. So that team will go into homes where people are diagnosed with life-limiting illness, and they'll provide all those supports I just talked about, as well as maybe arrange some home care for them. They're excellent at pain and symptom management, so they try to keep people more comfortable and able to deal with the symptoms that arise. They're more accessible maybe than the primary care team because they're at the end of the phone if they're needed. But once again, they do work in coordination with the primary care teams. they work on a consultative basis, so they're not there all the time, and they don't provide care 24 hours a day to the patients. So they come in, they do their assessments, and then they visit regularly after that and try and address the needs that way. So we work very closely with them. We collaborate with them all the time to find out where the gaps are in the care they provide and what else might be needed for the community. So this is just an example, this slide, of some of the things that I've already mentioned. One of the big things they do provide is psychological and bereavement support. So they'll also help plan for death if that's imminent, and help families get prepared for some of those things that they need, and try and provide some respite and caregiver support, because sometimes it can be a fairly long journey. So the other thing we wanted to point out, because we represent both palliative and hospice care, is just the difference between palliative care and hospice care. So I think there's a fair bit of confusion, number one, between what the professional Nova Scotia Health palliative care team do and what we do, and then the difference between palliative care and hospice care. So when you're looking at hospice care, it's really care that's provided closer to the end of life. And it's provided once the decision is made by the patient and the healthcare providers to no longer look for curative treatments or provide treatments. So it's really much more focused on end-of-life care. It can be sometimes provided by a coordinated team. Some locations have a palliative hospice team that work together in the community. The other thing that I want to point out is that hospice care often takes place in the last 6 months of someone's life. So that doesn't mean they're necessarily admitted to a hospice building at that point, but at that point they've decided that treatment isn't for them. It's quality of life that they're going to focus on. So the things that we feel a hospice would bring to our area are the fact that patients could be cared for when they can't be cared for at home anymore, and they don't really want to be admitted to a hospital. Then if we had a freestanding hospice, they could come there in a more home-like environment where things would be quiet. They would have meal choices that appeal to them. There'd be facilities for their families to come and spend time with them in a comfortable environment. They'd hopefully have access to nature to be able to get outside and enjoy those last days, as well as having all the symptom pain management that they might require, but on a 24-hour basis. So they'd be there all the time. What we're hearing from the healthcare providers that we meet with is that, sometimes families do really well. They do the best they can do. But in those last weeks, those last days, things fall apart because the patients are requiring more personal care, they're having more trouble with pain management, and it can be a very distressing time for everybody. So some of the things I've had said to me by people who have experienced care in a hospice is it felt like I had arms wrapped around me. These are the survivors the whole time that we were there with my loved ones. So that's the environment we'd like to create. We'd like to create an environment for those who choose not to die at home to be able to die with dignity and respect and have the people around them who love them. So we just want to be clear that we're not saying that the medical care provided at hospital or anywhere else is not great. We just feel this would be an enhanced service and would relieve some pressure on the other areas of the healthcare system. Okay. Yep. That's it.
Get this back going the right way. That's okay. We wanted to share a few stats with you. As a society, quick technical support.
Hopefully that does it.
Thank you. Thank you. Between Marlene and I in technology, we always have a chuckle of who's going to destroy something first. So We wanted to share a few stats with you this morning because we, as a society, represent both Lunenburg and Queens, and that's based on the health areas as created by NSH. So when we're talking about areas that, talking about population growth and that, we're talking about both Lunenburg and Queens County together. So we have a good working relationship with the local Nova Scotia Health officials who are involved with palliative care. And annually, we get the statistics from those professionals. Last year, in 2023, there were 325 new referrals to palliative care. So that's within that Lunenburg and Queens County. That number of people were referred to palliative care. During that period of time, there were 247 deaths of those palliative patients. And as Marlene pointed out, just because you're in palliative care does not mean there's an immediate death or death is imminent. It means that you have a life-limiting illness or condition, and that may be 2-3 years or even longer. South Shore Regional, because it's a regional hospital, has certainly had the most of the in-hospital deaths, and that was 97 last year. But the really troubling statistics for us is that 25 of those patients passed away in the emergency room. And for those of you who have ever been to the emergency room at South Shore Regional Hospital, you know how conducive that room environment would be to having a quiet time for end of life for a loved one in your family. And so we're very concerned when we talk about care, it's not the level of care from the professionals, because we know they're doing the best they can, but we're talking about a level of care in an environment that provides an environment of compassion, dignity, and comfort for both the patient and their families so they can spend time with them. And if we look at families, if 1 or 2 people can get into a merge with the family member, that's all that's allowed. But if you have 8 siblings, who chooses which one's going to be there? So we have been working very hard to make sure that we have space. As we're negotiating, we were trying to keep track of the number of meetings we've had with Nova Scotia Health since 2019 when we were formed, and it's numerous. And we've met with numerous people because every time we seem to go to a meeting, there's a new player at the table, so we start over again and have that discussion. But while we've been working on those spaces with Nova Scotia Health, we've been busy doing things that we can control because we've kind of surveyed our community and said, what do you need in your community? And so one of our largest and busiest program is called the Beacon of Hope program. And that's designed for families with a limited financial income who the patient decides to have end of life at home. If you're in the hospital, everything is covered for you in your medication and your supplies and your needs. But if you're at home, if you need incontinence supplies, they're expensive. If you need special dietary considerations, it's expensive. If you need to rent a hospital bed or special equipment, it's expensive. So working with the palliative professional staff, the nurses and the doctors and the social worker, they identified a family that was financial need and applied to us for a grant, and we would maybe rent the hospital bed for them or give them specialized equipment or give them a gas card to get to their appointment. So it's last year we filled 40 of those requests for 40 different families in Lunenburg and Queens County through the Beacon of Hope so that they could have end of life at home. We have 3 coffee clubs for widows. We find that the widows will get together for coffee. It's not a grief support group per se, but it's an opportunity for someone with similar lived experiences to get together, and we do that once a week at 3 different locations and 3 different groups. We do cooking for care. What we've heard from people is one of the first things that goes if you have lost your spouse is your mealtime, because you're used to eating with someone else and sharing conversation. And so what happens, it's a can of soup or it's an egg or it's a piece of toast, and not the kind of meal that's really nutritious for you. So we do a cooking for care program. It's kind of like we go to Parkview Education Center. We have a retired home economics teacher. We supply the food. They prepare the food. If you can remember back to those of you that are maybe as old as I am, maybe not. Your home economics classes where you paired up with a partner and prepared the meal, and that's what they do with someone who's also had a significant loss in their life. So we prepare the food, it's nutritional food. They eat the meal together with company, and they take leftover food home with them, so they have food for another meal. So we do that as regularly as we can, working around the school schedule. Our Solace Fund, some people can't afford to have private counseling for grief and loss, so we support those again with financial need to pay private counseling up to 4 sessions. Some people need food from the food bank, and we have made arrangements with the food bank that if they don't have transportation, we would pick up the food bank order for them and deliver it to their doorstep. We have volunteers who come in and do an art program for some of the people that have had a significant loss in their life. We also find that in-home that there's comfort kits and mouth care kits. Your dental health is lost it. Your dental health is important to people, and often that's something that's neglected. So we provide, again, through the NSH folks who identify these patients, we create healthcare kits and mouth care kits to support them. I'll keep going. One of the new things that we are just in the process of starting, we've just hired an individual for a volunteer visitation program. The average age of caregiver in Lunenburg County is 65 plus. So if you think about someone who's looking after someone that they loved one in their home that is at end of life and trying to get support for them to get a break, it's very difficult. So we have just hired a coordinator for what we're calling a volunteer visitation program, and we'll be recruiting specifically trained volunteers that will offer a companionship to individuals who are identified who need that kind of support in home. They will not be providing any kind of health care, but it will be, thank you. It will be support. Okay. Yeah, no problem. As I mentioned, I'm a technology, I jinx it. It's just the way it is. So the volunteer visitation, the volunteers will be, as I said, will all be specifically trained and screened to go into a home and support the patient and the family. It might be reading a book with them, it might be doing crafts with them, it might be just listening and telling, well, they tell stories, but that will be starting in the new year. We'll be doing a launch of that in the new year. And our education programs, we have a little resource library in our office. We also supply books and materials for the South Shore Regional Library Services. We have End of Life Expo that we just had that over 200 people attended at the Bridgewater Baptist Church. We've had advanced care planning workshops. We do different varieties. Our education committee is very busy. They've traveled all over. They've just been up to Rosedale Home for Special Care to do a presentation there. They've been over to Hillside Pines. They go in and support, and we're meeting with the new complex here in Bridgewater on Friday to talk to them about different educational programs, because a lot of their staff aren't comfortable dealing with some of the issues they have to deal with, so we support them as best we can. One of the things that's kind of been there but not there, 3 years ago there was an announcement that there would be 5 dedicated beds at Fisherman's Memorial Hospital in Lunenburg. And we were asked, along with the foundation and the auxiliary, to help fund the retrofit and renovation for those 5 rooms. So the 3 groups got together. We completed that renovation and retrofit, paid the bills. And so it'll be 3 years in January that those rooms have been ready to go for patients, and there's a family room. So there's 5 patient rooms and a family room, and those rooms are still not open. They're sitting there with the beds. They have artwork on the walls that we got donated. We had quilts donated from the community. One of our local artists did a beautiful mural on the family room wall. It's all set up. And it's been a frustration for us, and I think a frustration for the community, as one of the patient said she was downstairs at Fisherman's as her husband was dying and knew that the rooms were with privacy and comfortable chairs and all of that were upstairs one floor, but not able to access those. So we've been working very hard with not only the NSH, but we've just had a meeting with the Premier to express our concerns. We're meeting with all of the MLAs. So we're really trying to push for those beds to get open. And as you know, staffing in medical professionals has been a challenge, and that's the issue that we've been told is the challenges in staffing, but it's been a frustrating one. I want to give you, before I turn it over to Marlene, I want to give you just a few stats. Just that we're looking at Lunenburg, Queens County, and we realize that we have an aging population here in Lunenburg, Queens County. And I was just saying to the mayor, the median age in Halifax is 38 years. In Lunenburg County, it's 53.8. So if you're thinking about that as far as influencing decisions that should be made around the government table, you're looking at that age population if you're median age. So young people are in the city, which would give you a different need than what's in Lunenburg, Queens County. So when we make our pitch to government for support, we realize that we're making a pitch based on information about the age group. We also look at the growing, Bridgewater is one of the fastest growing towns in Nova Scotia, and Lunenburg County is a fast growing county. So when you look at, we're almost 52,000 people, I think, from the last stats I saw, that we're reaching a capacity that we can host a hospice or dedicated beds, and which is what we're really looking for. And we'll continue our other programs that we're doing, but looking for support for the hospice. Marlene?
Just in closing, just want to review a little bit some of our future initiatives, and obviously we want to continue growing our programs across Lunenburg and Queens County, and we want to continue our advocacy work to try and to move things along. We realize that healthcare is very, very complicated, and they have a lot of things coming at them. But we do believe this will help realign some of the healthcare and how those dollars are spent. There's also statistics out there that this type of care is less expensive than the care provided in hospital. We'd like to eventually establish palliative care beds at the 3 hospitals. That's probably a ways off in that the beds are so overutilized right now. The idea of holding beds for a particular population, even though they're full of people with the same diagnosis, is a little challenging. One of the things we'd like to establish is a program that can help more men. We find the men are not as willing to come out to things like Coffee Club, or we have a few that come for Cooking for Care. But if we could, there's a movement, a Canadian movement called Men's Sheds, and we felt if we could do something like that in the near term, that might engage a few more men who are struggling as well in our communities, and maybe tend to do that a little bit more in silence. And we'd really like to acquire land eventually for a freestanding hospice somewhere in our area that would be easily accessed by physicians and supplies from the hospital, and also be convenient for the people of the communities that we serve. So our ask for you is just to help us, to support us in our advocacy work at the provincial level when you have an opportunity, and also maybe if you could look at cooperating, I know that's one of your goals, cooperating with especially the town of Bridgewater and the other municipalities to see if we can actually make this happen in our community to serve our community members much better. So thank you very much, and we're open to any questions you may have.
Well, thank you, Trudy and Marlene, for giving us that overview and outlining not only the great work, but the challenges that were faced here by your organization in trying to advocate for the beds in the hospital. I think that's a number one thing. But we'll open this up. If people have questions, Councillor Bell.
Thank you. Through you to Marlene, please. Marlene, can you give me an example of where there may be other freestanding hospice in Nova Scotia, other communities, and maybe how they went about doing that?
Okay. There are a number of freestanding hospice in Nova Scotia. The two that are closest to us there's one in Halifax, and we're hearing that they may be opening a second one in Halifax. There's another one in Kentville as well. It's been a long journey for both of those organizations, probably in excess of 10 years, maybe more, to get where they needed to get with government. And that was one of our asks when we met with the Premier, was to give us the go-ahead, because we need to partner with Nova Scotia Health to be able to move this forward. So we're asking for the go-ahead to actually start our fundraising campaign. We know we have amazing community support. We just had a $10,000 anonymous donation come in yesterday from BC. So, you know, there are people that believe in the work we're doing. The models are very different. The strategy that the province put forward is well, they're waiting for a new one. The old one's 2014, so they are supposedly updating it. But the models vary. The model we'd be looking for is, we feel we could build it if the province would operate it. Halifax has a mixed model where they still continue to provide some of the operating funds. So they're in the massive fundraising mode at all times. So they provide some things that you might not get just with Nova Scotia Health. They're able to be a little bit more creative. Kentville is similar to what we are looking to do, is to build it in an area that would be restful and peaceful, close to major services, but also provide them with that home-like environment. And yeah, so there are different models. Trudy, do you have anything to add to that?
Cape Breton, partnership with Member 2.
Yes, right. Cape Breton as well has a partnership with Member 2 for theirs.
So you've obviously been exploring this. Can you pull a figure out of the air of what type of investment you would need to raise in order to do something like Kentville did?
We had it looked at and costed when we started this,
Yeah.
which was around 5-6,000, or 5-6 million. I'm thinking probably 10 million in today's market. But it's interesting. We have. Oh, sorry. Yeah, we had. We're probably looking at about a $10 million figure, but as Marlene said, we've already had 2 pledges of $1 million each, and we haven't done anything. We haven't asked anybody for any money, and so as far as the community willingness, we're feeling it, but we don't have anything to say. Oh, we'll take your money and we'll put it here right now. So, but and as Marlene mentioned, not only are there beds in the hospice, but every other area has dedicated beds in hospital as well. So if somebody goes into the Aberdeen Hospital in New Glasgow, there are dedicated palliative beds in those hospitals. That is a whole different environment, because there's pull-out chairs, cots for family to stay overnight. There's a family room, there's a kitchenette that they can, you know, and so it's sleeping chairs. It's a whole different environment.
Thank you.
Councillor Vino, and then Oikel, and then I think Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was not aware that the designated area in the Lunenburg Hospital was not open. I remember the announcement and I remember the excitement. Can you speak to any reason why that's not open?
Well, we're being told it's a staffing issue. So in the beginning, it was just before COVID, when the beds were retrofitted and renovated. They told us that they had the nursing staff hired, but then they got reassigned during COVID. And since then, it seems to be a physician issue. Recently, they did put a posting up for a medical director, so that's given us a bit of hope. But in between then, it's just been, you know, it's staffing is all they've told us. So anyway, hopefully that will change.
Councillor Oikel.
Yeah, my question was similar to Councillor Vino's. And I'm wondering, regarding, because it's a staffing problem, are the other hospices that are available in other hospitals that you mentioned, are they all open? Or are they also closed because of staffing?
They're open, and actually Kentville opened just before COVID. They had a bit of a delay. Yeah, they were ready to open, and then COVID hit, but they were open within 6 months, so.
Okay. It would be interesting to know exactly what staff they are
Well,
missing, if they would be,
Yeah,
you know.
we do try to, we do try to push that and get that information from them, but we haven't had a lot of success with that. They have increased the palliative care physician quota for our area, although usually the palliative care physicians don't provide the care in hospital. They're more specialty, and they're the ones that the family physicians and other doctors would go to for advice, or if they had a question, or if they had a concern. So they haven't been able to recruit to that last position, but I don't think that would necessarily help the beds opening, from my understanding of it.
Councillor Brooks?
I just wanted to thank both of you for being here today and for the work that you're doing. As someone whose family was touched by both palliative and hospice care in the last couple of years, and I'm sure others in this room have experienced it, I can tell you this is our last best opportunity to invest in our older community. This is an investment in dignity. This is an investment in human beings, and it is the right thing to do. And I hope that this council will stand behind it to try to help these individuals who are pushing this, to push the province at that level, because this is the right thing to do. Every one of us in this room hopes to die with dignity and do it the best way possible. I can tell you that, you know, the beds in the hospital is a good intermediary step, and the idea of a standalone building is a wonderful thing. I know it's costly. I know it's down the road, but I hope it's something that we will all think about as we think about our family members and we think about ourselves in the future. But thank you so much for being here today.
Councillor Smith?
Yeah, I want to say thank you as well, and just more of a technical question. How do people become attached to your services? Particularly, I'm thinking if people haven't been part of the palliative care service, but if they want to access bereavement services or other services that you've mentioned.
Any of the funding ones, like Beacon of Hope, would have to go through the palliative services for that. But any of the other programs, like our Cooking for Care, all we say is if you've had a significant loss, we don't screen you at the door. So it's not only, you know, losing a spouse, but a child or your parents or whoever. Any of the resources that we have in our office are available to anyone who wants to drop in. Any of the programs that we run, like the advanced care planning or any of those, are available to anyone who wants. And so through our mailing list and our Facebook posts, people can sign up for any of those that they're interested in.
Councillor DeLong?
Thank you very much for being here, and thank you for your presentation. How many beds in our area do you think we would require based on the numbers that you showed earlier?
What we've asked for as far as a hospice is a 10-bed hospice. And I think given if you're drawing from Queens County, drawing from the Hubbards area, from Halifax down to, I think we could unfortunately fill 10 beds.
10 beds as well seems to make sense with staffing and the way, if you look at most hospices, they're 10 beds. So obviously it works for the number of staff you have to hire and the care levels that you want to provide. So it tends to be the norm with most of the hospices.
Questions? Other questions? Thank you, Trudy and Marlene, for the presentation. Clearly, others in this room did not know about the situation in Lunenburg, so bringing that to this council's attention, I think, will make us think a little bit about what we can do to support the work that you're doing as community volunteers. And I think it will be a conversation that we'll address at some of our other meetings as we go forward as a new council. Clearly, there's a lot of work to do, and I think you've indicated to us the kind of support that is waiting in the wings for this kind of service in our community. And I think we just need to get through those barriers, and I know you've worked hard on it, but it's time for the rest of us to kind of, I think, stand up and get on with pushing too. So thank you very much, and continued good work in our community.
Thank you all for the opportunity to be here. Thank you.
Okay, we'll resume with our agenda, and under staff reports, turn it over to our Deputy CAO, Alex, to take us to issues around food banks and shelters in our community.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I don't need to inform council members that there is housing and food insecurity in our community. Last year, council included $10,000 in your budget to support organizations that are working on addressing the folks that are in the most perilous situations in terms of accessing healthy food and shelter. So we're simply recommending the same approach which was taken last year, and we're looking for confirmation or direction from council of whether or not that's the approach you want to take, or if you're looking for something different. So on the food bank side of things, our wellness committee at the staff level has pretty regularly organized different fundraisers. We recently just completed a 50-50 ticket purchase to get Christmas gifts for a family. In the month of December, the Wellness Committee will be running a cash donation drive from staff members to generate support for the New Germany Food Bank. Last year, Council generously offered to match these funds, not only for the New Germany Food Bank, but then also for the 3 other food banks in the towns, which also serve MODL residents. So we're looking for confirmation that you're comfortable with the similar approach. And then there's a remaining $6,000 in that account, which we're recommending be provided to the overnight shelter for people experiencing homelessness, which is run out of the town of Bridgewater, but certainly serves MODL residents. They do provide, or they do receive some base funding from the Department of Community Services. But this is a really critical service, and the base funding doesn't cover all of the expenses of running the facility. So they have to rely on donations in order to provide full meals, in order to provide toiletries, any other things that are incidental to the care. Last year there was an organization which was providing a warming center, but that structure has changed a little bit, so Souls Harbor is not providing that same service, so we're recommending the full $6,000 go towards the overnight shelter.
Could we have the motion put on the floor, and then we can have discussion around the points that have been raised by the Deputy CAO? Councillor Bell, would you be prepared to put the motion on the floor, and then perhaps Councillor Moore could second it, and I know she has a question, so thank you.
To Your Honor, Mayor McLean-Weil and members of the council, I move that Municipal Council approve matching funds for the Wellness Committee food drive up to a maximum of $1,000 to each of the 4 food banks serving the municipality. That is the Bridgewater Food Bank, the Town of Lunenburg Food Bank, the Town of Mahone Bay Food Bank, and the New Germany Food Bank. And further, that council approve funding in the amount of $6,000 for the overnight shelter operated by the South Shore Open Doors Association. And I so move.
It's been moved by Councillor Bell and seconded by Councillor Moore. Would you like to speak to it?
Yes, please. Remind me, through you to Alex, the South Shore Open Doors Association, is that the John Howard on King Street? Thank you.
Councillor Oikel.
I'm just wondering regarding up to the maximum of $1,000. We did this the same the other years, and I'm just wondering how much it went to. Was it 1,000? Did staff raise more?
I did ask that question, and it was a minimum of $1,200 raised by the staff group, which also included council members' donations as well, I should specify. But yes, it did exceed $1,000.
Okay. All right, so would it be better just to say that we just meet it rather than go to a maximum? Like, is there enough money to be able to do that?
There's $10,000 in the account
10,000.
that's assigned there. So you'd have to provide some additional direction. So you could, for example, draw out of the council-approved contingency. So the current budget includes $80,000, which is not assigned and can only be used if council gives specific direction to use that account. And it is often applied when you get an unexpected request from a community organization for example, an event that needs funding or an unexpected need and you want to contribute to that. That's what that fund has generally been used for. So that would be a location where you could do that if you wanted to provide further support. I do know that the food banks, we had received feedback. Previous drives were obviously appreciated, but the feedback we got was that the cash donations were far more useful because the banks were able to make purchases specifically for it, and the level of contribution was absolutely appreciated where it was. I'm sure they won't turn down additional funding,
Right,
but
and I saw in the report that we could also change it from maximum to we just give $1,000. Have nothing to do with, like, you know,
Yep.
staff does their
Yep.
thing, but we don't need to match it. We can just give $1,000.
Yep, and assuming the drive goes as it did last year, that's a moot point, but it would guarantee the funding.
Right.
If you don't guarantee it, I suppose there's more incentive to ensure that staff step up to the plate.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if any other members of council are interested in any of those other two options that we could change the motion for that.
It's meant as an incentive. Keep that in the back of your mind.
Other questions, Councillor Moore?
So can you explain that to me again?
If I can. So it says up to a maximum of $1,000.
Right.
So last year it was $1,200 that was raised, but
Right.
we only gave $1,000. So
Okay.
we could say that we would just match, or we could say that we will just give $1,000 regardless, even if staff only raises $980, we will still give $1,000. We could do either. Or, as Councillor Bell said, it's an incentive to try to get staff to make us pay more.
Right.
Councillor Hubley?
I would like to see the motion remain as it is. I think it's important that it is an incentive and that we get involved and we show that we're involved from the staff perspective and the council's perspective. I really think I'd like to see it stay the way it is.
It was just options. I like options.
Okay, the motion's on the floor. Is there further question or comment? Hearing none, I will call for those in favor signify by raising their hand. Those who are opposed, motion is carried unanimously. We will move on to Planning and Development Services, and we'll ask, it's Jeff Merrill who will come as Director of Planning and Development Services for the appointment of development officers. You can provide some background to this.
Good morning. So the recommendation in front of you today is that council appoint the following staff as development officers. We do have them in the audience with us today. Anna Giblin, Jacob McPherson, and Corinne Mahone. Just a little bit about what development officers do. So they administer our land use bylaw and our subdivision bylaw. So the Municipal Government Act requires that council appoint a development officer or development officers. The reason we're bringing this today is this prepares us for the minimum mandatory planning. So we're working on, right now we have planning that covers 15% of the municipality, but the province has said municipalities have to have planning that covers 100% of their municipality. So we are working on that. You know, this prepares us ahead of time, so staff will be appointed as development officers, and they'll be able to, have some experience before the full plan gets adopted by council. So there is no budget implications for this. Development officer duties are already included in the job descriptions for our planners. So this is just it's a formality for council to appoint the development officers.
Okay, thank you for that. Could we have the motion put on the floor, and then we'll have questions or discussion that might follow from that? The motion is 11.2.1. Someone willing to make that motion? Moved by Kathy, or Councillor Moore, please, if you put the motion forward.
Okay. To honor Mayor McLean Weil and members of council, I move that municipal council appoint the following staff as development officers for the municipality of the District of Lunenburg: Anna Giblin, Jacob McPherson, and Karen Mahone.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hubley. Now, is there question or discussion on this? Councillor Brooks.
How many development officers do we currently have?
Yeah, currently we have two. Norma Schaefer is our manager of development, so she's our senior development officer, and then Melissa DeVoe is our assistant development officer. So this would bring us to 5 individuals that would be able to sign off on the development control items.
And the staff will become full-time development officers? That will be their focus of their duties going forward?
No. So the planners, it will be a portion of their week will be dedicated towards that. So it allows us to, if there's vacation or sick time, it allows us to cover off. We have a deeper pool of development officers to be able to cover, to make sure that we can continue to meet our service standards.
Other questions? Councillor Burns.
Thank you, and through you, my question, just first, like a quick comment, I just want to thank Norma and Melissa. I've been in my other hat, I've seen the work that they do, and I know that they sit at the nexus of a great deal of information that comes into them, and in a great deal of information and approvals they need to get from other parties to come back, so it's not always just them. My question, well, I can see where this is a good idea, because more people handling that process is going to speed things up, and I think that's wonderful. My question is just more about consistency, and mainly for my own communication here to residents. It would still be that I assume that internally there's like a checklist of things, so as they go through, if one development officer is handling something and one development officer is handling something in a slightly different geographical region, there shouldn't be any inconsistencies in the approvals just because of the person. There's very little discretion at the development officer level. It's more the person who's qualified to handle the process that's very clearly laid out, is it not?
Yeah, it's almost 100%. So there are checklists and processes in place that the development officers have to, that we have in place to follow. So that system is in place, and Ms. Schaefer is our manager of development. So she's responsible for training our development officers, making sure that there is a consistent process and procedures in place. Some of the, it is a development officer is appointed by council for the to interpret council's bylaws and policies. So that's where there are some areas that a development officer has to use judgment and interpret, and it doesn't come up as often, but it's one of those ones where when you have one development officer, it's easy because there's consistent. But as soon as you go out and do 2 or 5, there's a little bit more effort that has to go on to make sure that it's consistent amongst the development team. So we, Norma's training of the development officers, having, weekly meetings to discuss any issues that come up, or anything that's, those one-offs that it's like, oh, well, we've never dealt with this before. How are we going to do this? And kind of discussing it as a team. So arriving at a consensus that this is the best interpretation.
Thank you very much.
Other questions? Councillor Brooks.
I was just curious, if the shifting of these duties with the staff, will it in any way necessitate further staff hiring 6 months down the road? Or are you anticipating that?
it's always possible because I think with the 3 extra, we'll have the capacity. But at the end of the day, it will depend on what council does with your minimum mandatory planning. So if, for example, a lot of development agreements tools get used, that uses a lot of staff time, and so that would be our planning staff would handle those development agreements. So it kind of eats away. But the ultimate goal from staff as we prepare is to minimize the use of development agreements. There will still be some amendment applications that we'll have to deal with because you'll never get the document 100%. There'll always be something that comes up. But we're trying to put as many things into as of right tool as opposed to something that takes a lot more time, like a development agreement. But it's anticipated that, like the staff, and you'll hear more about what the planning staff are working on at your orientation later today. But the planning staff right now are heavily involved in writing and drafting the land use bylaw. Once that's in place, our positions will morph into, more of the development control as that ramps up, and then dealing with any of the amendment applications or development agreements that come in. So it's I think with the team of 5 that we'll be able to cover off, and when we look at other municipalities, like other jurisdictions of similar sizes, I think we'll be in line.
Other questions? If I may, I'll just ask one, and that is, is there, besides the internal training that's going on, is there a designation or a professional accreditation that goes with development officer positions?
Yes, there is, and we always like to have staff go through that, those other designations. So they're the Municipal Development Officers Association of Nova Scotia has a program where they have what's called a development technician, a general development officer, and a senior development officer, and they have a beautiful binder, very detailed system that candidates can work through. So we would absolutely encourage our staff to go through that process.
Other questions? Here I don't see anything. So could the motion's on the floor. It was moved by, who moved it? Councillor Moore and seconded by Councillor Hoopley. All those in favor raise their hand, please. And those opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. So thank you. We look forward to the planning discussion that will happen in our orientation later today. Next on the agenda, 11.3 from Recreation, Parks and Tourism. And this is regarding the designated community fund, Friends of Cherry Hill Old Community Cemetery. Are you handling that? No? Oh. Yeah. Oh, there's Ruth. Okay.
Oh, yes, I'm here.
If you can provide us background, Ms. Walwyn, on this.
Yes, exactly. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Ruth Walwyn. I'm the Tourism and Event Development Officer within the Department of Recreation. So before you is a report with a motion requesting the District of Lunenburg grant the Friends of Cherry Hill Old Community Cemetery $1,190 as per the criteria outlined in the Designated Community Project Fund Policy MDL 48. Since this might be the first time some of you are encountering a request of this nature, I'll provide a brief overview of the Designated Community Project Fund policy. This policy was created to assist nonprofit groups without charitable status in securing funding for capital projects. Through this segregated fund, the municipality of the District of Lunenburg administers donations on behalf of nonprofit groups and issues tax-deductible receipts to donors. Without this policy, in order to be able to issue a tax-deductible receipt, nonprofit groups must be a registered charitable organization. And sometimes to get this status, it's difficult, costly, and time-consuming. So a designated community project fund enables groups who do not have charitable status to fundraise for capital projects as the District of Lunenburg accepts the donation and issues the tax receipt. The donor receives a receipt they can claim for tax purposes, and the nonprofit group is able to fundraise for their project. The municipality charges a 5% admin fee up to a maximum of $5 per contribution, and to release the donated funds to the nonprofit group, a motion is required by council. So the report included in today's council package is for the Friends of Cherry Hill Old Community Cemetery, who established their designated community project fund in 2022 for the purpose of restoring, preserving, and maintaining the local cemetery. So the recommended motion before you is that the municipality of the District of Lunenburg grant the Friends of Old Cherry Hill Community Cemetery $1,190 as per the criteria outlined in the Designated Community Project Fund Policy MDL 48.
Okay, thank you. Could we have the motion put on the floor by one of our councilors? It's, okay, okay. It's, go ahead.
To Her Honor, Mayor McLean Weil and members of council, I move that Municipal Council grant the Friends of the Cherry Hill Old Community Cemetery $1,190 as per the criteria outlined in the Designated Community Project Fund MDL 48.
Do I have a seconder for the motion, please? Seconded by Councillor DeLong. Is there a discussion or question on this? Councillor Brooks.
Can you just briefly tell me what the criteria is?
The criteria to become a designated community project fund?
It says the criteria outlined in the designated community project fund. I'm just curious what that criteria.
If a group's interested in becoming a designated, they start by filing an application with staff, and the application must include the completed application, it being signed, a copy of a financial statement, insurance, name and coverage. There's a list of executive board members that's required, a signed letter of understanding, and a copy of a memorandum of the association. So those are all required through the application in order to become a designated community project fund.
So those, pardon me, those criteria sound like logistics. Is there criteria specific to the plan? Like what is this $1,190 going to for the Cherry Hill Old Community?
Oh, okay, sorry. I think I misunderstood your question. So for this specific request, they are working on the cemetery, specifically the stone wall at the entrance of the cemetery. So they're requesting to withdraw funds that were donated for that purpose. So the old Cherry Hill Community Cemetery, they're raising funds to cover the cost of restoring that stone wall. Does that answer your question?
I think so. It sounds like you're saying they're requesting permission to withdraw existing funds. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So basically, this fund is created so that nonprofit groups that don't have charitable status can issue tax receipts for donations. So we received 2 donations through this fund for the purpose of restoring the cemetery wall. So what happens now is that a motion is required by council in order to withdraw those funds. We withhold $5 per contribution, so $10 in total.
Thank you for your clarification.
You're welcome.
This is a way that community groups who don't have charitable status can actually get donations, give the donor a receipt, and all the municipal government does is facilitate the process. So, Councillor Bell.
If you go and make a day trip down to that Cherry Hill area, what they're building is an Acadian historic replica style stone wall. It is really quite amazing to see, and it's part of our heritage. We're lucky that we have someone in the area that can do that type of work, and it's worth the trip going down to look at it. But then you can always go to the beach right next door.
Thank you for that. Any other questions on this? All those in favor signify by raising their hand. Those opposed, motion is passed unanimously. We'll move on to some reports from council members, and if I could ask Councillor Oikel to report on MJSB.
Certainly. So MJSB, that stands for, those that don't know, the Municipal Joint Service Board. We met on November the 20th, 2024. And the Municipal Joint Service Board includes the Waste Site, IT, HR, and Work Safety. The Joint Services Board is made up of the Town of Bridgewater, Town of Mahone Bay, and the District of Lunenburg. We had a board orientation session to help familiarize each member of council assigned to the board with the organization. We moved into a regular monthly meeting. Chair and vice chair were selected, and they are the chair, Mayor Mitchell, vice chair, myself, Councillor Oikel. The following board members were assigned to the Finance Committee of the MJSB. From Mahone Bay, Councillor Feeney, Bridgewater Council, Mike Conklin. From the District of Lunenburg, Councillor Edgar Burns. Second quarter financial report given by John Feeney, the Director of Corporate Services. As a future note, future financial reports will be given by Councillor Burns in the future, but I'm making the one for today. The second quarter results are positive. Excuse me. We are projecting a surplus of $112,000 versus budget year-to-date, consistent with the results presented in the first quarter report. The first quarter report was presented and approved by the board on September the 11th, where the MJSB presented a surplus of $49,000 versus budget as of June the 30th, 2024. Key highlights of the MJSB year-to-date performance as of the second quarter ending September the 30th include total revenues primarily driven by increased commercial and non-partner tonnage. Partner costs are in line with the budget. Increased tonnage volumes were a significant factor in the surplus, supported by favorable weather conditions and a boost in the construction activity. C&D, which is construction and demolition tonnage, was up 52%, septic tonnage was up by 11%, and billable waste was up by 7%. We reviewed the strategic priorities, and they are all on track, and the MJSB voted to renew our land-filled contract with Kaiser Meadows, which is in Chester, and that is my report.
Thank you, Councillor Oikel. Are there questions on that? That was a detailed report, and thank you. Anybody want to ask? Okay. The next, I'll ask our Deputy Mayor, Chastity Vino, to report.
Thank you so much. It's only been 2 weeks in this position, so I don't have too much to report on, but I've attended agenda briefings, chaired my first Policy and Strategy Committee last week. The mayor and I had met to discuss public input going forward and how we can improve that process. And this evening I'll be attending NSFM with several of you around the table for their first annual fall conference of this sitting.
Thank you. Any questions for the Deputy Mayor? Thank you, Councillor Vino. And I'll give my mayor's report. It is a pleasure to report on my activities since election in October 19th. Like the rest of you newly elected councillors, the learning curve has been steep, continues to climb every day. Initially, the first week, I met with all the councillors individually and had conversations. We focused our conversations around the following questions. What did you hear on the doorsteps? So I could learn how that corresponded with what I had heard, and what projects that MODL is involved in or has on the agenda that are concerning to you. And finally, what committees you were interested in serving on, and I hope we were able to accommodate your interests and your expertise to put you in in the committees where you feel you can make the best contributions. This was very helpful in making, as I said, making the recommendations to the committees, and I hope that you will be happy with those appointments. The second valuable part of the conversation was in helping to plan for our strategic planning session, which will take place in about 10 days. And so we have some key themes that were common to all of you, and I've shared those with both the CAO and the Deputy CAO, so they are aware of that. And I didn't attach names to them, I just attached, put them in categories, and they've looked at those as well to help in their planning and going forward, as I said, with strategic planning. The second week after the election, I met with the directors of the various departments within MODL, which included finance, administration, and corporate services, economic development, engineering, planning, and parks and recreation. And this was a good introduction and an opportunity for me to be briefed in 3 areas as I requested. What were the key projects they were working on, and what was in the pipeline for work approved by the previous council, and what were they concerned about these projects, and what did they think the council needed to consider over the next 4 years. We've had a number of opportunities for orientation and starting to build relationships within the council to get to know each other and develop good working relationships. The 2-day orientation sponsored by the Department of Municipal Affairs in early November reinforced some of what we already had covered in our orientation. However, there was much more detail provided in some of those sessions, and I think we all benefited from that. I've been involved in the initial planning of the strategic planning session, which will be led by Tim Mary from Mahone Bay, and will take place on December 12th and 13th at the former Windhorse Farm near Wenzel's Lake. Deputy Mayor Chastity Vino and Councillor Bell are helping in the planning along with the staff. This will set out the key priorities for us in the coming years, 4 years, and develop a set of principles and values that will guide our working relationships as we move forward. I've worked with Tim Mary before, and he is a gifted facilitator who I am confident will provide us with a very productive experience. The discussions I've had with councillors and staff have identified the need for better communication and engagement with our residents. This will be an important part of our discussion at the planning session as we develop plans for better interaction with residents and providing them with the information they do want to hear through our regular meetings and our workshops and public information sessions. I've given a lot of thought to this, and I believe there are a number of changes that can be made quite easily. Others will take more time to implement, so I'm looking forward to this discussion that we will have at our planning session. There's more orientation for all of us as we will continue with this process in just after lunch today, and we will hear from more of those directors. This week, we will get a better understanding of some of the key issues we will be facing as councillors through the Federation of Nova Scotia Municipalities being held in Halifax. I appreciated an opportunity to attend 2 fire department annual banquets in Hebville and Italy Cross Middlewood, and with councillors Oikel and Reinhardt. It was a great chance to meet the members of those 2 fire services and bring greetings on your behalf. The fire service in our community is a critical one, which provides our residents with an important service. And we need to ensure we are working well with the departments so we can have that critical service well-resourced and able to deliver second-to-none service in our district. So I thank you for your support and encouragement in these early days, and I do look forward to the work we are going to do together over the next 4 years, but we'll take 1 week at a time. So, any questions anyone has for me at this point? I see no further business, and I would say the meeting stands adjourned at this point. We are going to have lunch. I'm not sure if it's quite ready yet, but we're going to have lunch in the room next door, and then we'll begin our orientation session with, and maybe you'd like to outline what we're going to do this afternoon, or we can wrap up this meeting and then talk about that. Thank you.